So I'm going to start with an apology from me and from one of our speakers today. So Social Good Connect, unfortunately, aren't able to join us. But I think we still have a pretty fantastic lineup of speakers. Pilotlight, Scottish Tech Army, Inspiring Scotland, and Volunteer Scotland are here with us today. And in fact, the idea for this session came from a piece of work from Volunteer Scotland, which was it was a report highlighting the range of factors that is affecting the nature and level of volunteering through the cost of living crisis. So we all know how important volunteers are to many social enterprises out there, and we also know during COVID how critical their contribution was to what was at the time seen as a one-off generational crisis. We now find ourselves at war with the war in Ukraine. We're not at war with Ukraine. The cost of living crisis, and it feels like we're living with constant change. We've got huge dollops of uncertainty and a world that feels, I think, significantly less solid for a lot of us. But what's pretty clear also is that the serious impact of the cost of living crisis on people and communities is, like COVID, affecting our most vulnerable and our most disadvantaged people. So I'm really pleased to have Debbie Maltman here from Volunteer Scotland, who was part of the report I talked about earlier, who was involved in that. And I guess she's going to set the context for us. She's going to review the evidence and look at the potential impact the cost of living is having on volunteering. So I am handing over to you now, Debbie. Thank you.
Thank you. So hopefully everyone can see my screen.
So thanks, Debbie.
Yeah, sorry. So I'm Debbie Maltman. I'm a research officer at Volunteer Scotland. And as Jayne's introduction said, I'm here to chat a little bit today about a report that we recently published in September, although it feels like things have moved very fast since then. So just talk a little bit today about the impact of the cost of living crisis on volunteers and volunteering in Scotland. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Volunteer Scotland, this is just some of the key areas we work on. So I work in the research and evaluation team. We have a practice and standards team who looks after the volunteer charter, Investors in Volunteering Awards, and Volunteer Friendly. We do a lot around partnership and coordination, bringing third sector organisations together. And I think that was evidenced really well in the recently launched Volunteer Action Plan. And we're doing an immense amount around policy and influencing at the moment. The most recent example is a letter was sent to Shona Robinson last night by a coalition of third sector organisations and umbrella bodies, including Volunteer Scotland, calling for her to look at the evidence we have on the impact of the cost of living on the third sector and to ask for interventions to be made. So a little bit of background to the research. Back in August, we had a meeting with the British Red Cross. Both organisations recognised that there was basically no evidence on the impact of cost of living on volunteering. Quite rightly, research at that time focused on individuals and organisations, but we knew there was a massive gap to fill. So we set off to write the report to understand how the cost of living is going to impact on volunteering. And it was really important for us to look at both formal and informal volunteering, given the role that both played during COVID and the incredible contributions that all types of volunteering made during that crisis. We had to do the report quite quickly. We had an opportunity to present the evidence at the SNP National Conference, and we were really keen to get this in front of MSPs as quickly as possible. For that reason, we exclusively focused on secondary data from Scotland and the wider UK. We didn't go out with any surveys of our own. We haven't yet, that may come. So it was mainly a literature review with some key sources. So you may be familiar with the Scottish Third Sector Tracker, but I'll chat through that in a couple of minutes and maybe try and recruit some more of you to join that. There's a new suite of reports called Understanding Scotland by Diffley Partners that focus more on people and organisations, but it's a really good series of reports if anybody's looking for some background information. And the last report we drew on was The Road to Recovery, which Volunteer Scotland published and is now part of a book towards the end of the second lockdown. So coming out of COVID-19, we had static adult formal participation rates of 26%. Other evidence has shown that formal participation fell during COVID-19. It's a bit of a definitional issue. So the Scottish Household Survey for formal volunteering includes anyone volunteering through a group, club or organisation. So we think we're picking up a big part of mutual aid in there, which is where the traditional formal volunteering, perhaps in charity shops, fell away during COVID. Mutual aid stepped up massively, which is why it's stayed static. And we saw an incredible 20% increase in informal volunteers, informal volunteering over that time. And the contribution that informal volunteers made during COVID-19 is something we've written quite a lot about in our Road to Recovery report. So the Scottish Third Sector Tracker is funded by Scottish Council for Voluntary Organisations, the Scottish Government and a consortium of other funders. It was launched in the summer of 2021, and it was launched at a time when there was a lack of understanding of the impact of COVID-19 on the third sector as a whole and what we could actually do to help. It's helpfully been extended, so now we've got cost of living questions in it, which are really, really insightful for us. It's longitudinal research, so all that means is that it takes place every quarter. It's had 4 waves so far. It's all completed online. Wave 5 is currently in the field at the moment. Wave 6 will be completed this year. And we're just waiting to confirm that it will be extended beyond Wave 6 with additional funding being made available. The survey is open to any third sector organisation. So if anybody wants to have a say, answer the questions, it's not a huge survey. There's lots of information. I've got links at the end where you can go to the SCVO page, but you know, anyone who wants to sign up, please do get involved because it's really helping inform policy and influencing at the moment, as well as a wider evidence base in Scotland. So the first thing we looked at was demand and supply for core services, and just a bit of a to remember is that the wave that we're looking at, wave 4, took place in the summer. So this is before anything, before any kind of autumn winter impacts, and at that point 60% of third sector organisations were already experiencing increased demand. And the way the tracker asks is it asks over the previous 3 months. So that's a massive increase in demand, considering we haven't even come into autumn and winter yet, where we know there's going to be a lot more demand. The survey found, which was quite interesting, that the increase in demand was more prevalent in larger organisations. So organisations with a turnover over £100,000, 77% had seen an increase in demand. Unfortunately, again, with it being summer, 20% of third sector organisations are already struggling to cope with the increased demand. So that's something that we really need to keep an eye on. We were quite keen to look at the key drivers of increased demand. So the third sector tracker asked all respondents, which emerging needs have you seen become worse amongst communities or target groups you serve? So what are the issues that you're seeing become more prevalent amongst the beneficiaries of your services? So we've looked at we split it into 2. So we're looking at health and wellbeing needs. I don't think it'll be surprising for anyone on this call to see that mental health and wellbeing is the highest at 67%. Social isolation and loneliness is 46%, and it'll only get worse, as we know, during the winter months. And 52% of organisations are seeing a deterioration in physical health and well-being. There's been some commentary around the report that, well, that's bad, but it's better than during 2021. That's not something that we're keen to portray. This is a really bad situation for health and well-being in Scotland, and we're moving into some of the hardest months for people coming into the winter. Financial and economic needs. I don't think it's surprising that cost of living is coming out on top at 66% of organisations seeing that impact on their beneficiaries already. Greater financial hardship, fuel poverty, and food insecurity are all having big impacts at the moment. And what we're seeing is the cost of living crisis is just exacerbating and is extending the financial impacts from COVID-19. So nobody's getting any respite. It just seems to keep coming and keep getting worse. So we then looked at the top 3 challenges facing third sector organisations, and we split this into financial challenges. So difficulty fundraising, we've seen slightly fewer organisations having issues around that, and we think that's reflecting more places and spaces opening after the COVID-19 restrictions were lifted, so more charity shops being able to open. Financial or cash flow constraints is actually higher now than it was when the tracker started looking at data for COVID-19, so that's really concerning to us. And the one standout is the rising costs and or inflation. So it's just going up and up. So it's gone from 14% in winter 2021, and it's now sitting at 37% in summer 2022. Volunteering and staff challenges show a little bit of a different trend, and it just shows that third sector organisations aren't getting any breaks in these areas. The situation is continuing to get worse. So we saw volunteer shortages back in summer 2021 of 24%. It's currently sitting at 35% coming into winter. Staffing issues and shortages were at 12% during summer 2021, and that's increased massively to 26% in summer 2022. We then looked at the tracker distills out the single biggest challenge facing third sector organisations. So in the summer, the biggest challenge is volunteer shortages. So 16% of third sector organisations, this is their biggest challenge over the summer. Staffing issues and shortages, difficulties fundraising, rising cost inflation, financial and cash flow constraints, that makes up the top 5 biggest challenges, and that accounts for 60% of third sector organisation. The remaining 40% was split between 8 other categories. One of them was don't know. We do have some organisations saying they're facing no challenges, but we're still seeing trends in those other 8 challenges, some more prevalent in some sectors and areas around people returning, volunteers returning, and issues with volunteers returning after COVID-19. So we took all of that and we put it into an analytical impact model. So we feel that the impact on people, organisations and communities all have a massive role to play in the impact on volunteering and volunteers in Scotland. So the impacts on people, we're seeing reduced disposable income, increases in homelessness, adverse health and well-being, and we're seeing a massive strain on people's time starting to come through more in the data. Organisations are facing a perfect storm. They've got increased costs, reduced income, their service demands are rising, and unfortunately we're already starting to see business closures. For communities, sadly, we're seeing community resilience, which played such a huge part in supporting each other through COVID-19 weekends. And we're seeing that geographies subject to poverty are most disadvantaged by the cost of living crisis. So what does that mean for volunteering and volunteers? So as I've mentioned, we're seeing an increased demand for volunteering services, but volunteer numbers are reducing. They're just not there to support that demand. Volunteer recruitment is now the major issue facing third sector organisations. We're seeing potential displacement of employees by volunteers, which is completely against the volunteer charter. The most recent example we saw was around Edinburgh Council recruiting volunteers during the bin strikes. We're seeing health and well-being of volunteers projected to worsen, but there are less support going to be available. We're seeing places to volunteer formally reducing opening hours, and some are facing closure or have even closed. And we're seeing impacts of volunteering and volunteers most severe in the most deprived communities in Scotland. So we had a look at some of the data just for this presentation about some of those stats for social enterprises. So in wave 4 in the summer, 60% of social enterprises were able to meet planned programmes and services. 59% are seeing an increase in demand, only 23% are seeing a fall. Incredibly, 84% are able to meet most or all of that increased demand, which just shows how hard social enterprises are working to meet that extra demand. The changes in societal needs that have been highlighted by social enterprises, mental health and well-being's up there at the top, the rise of cost of living and physical health and well-being. So that's largely in line with what we're seeing for the whole sector. The top 3 issues facing social enterprises are rising costs and inflation, uncertainty about the future, and interestingly, finding good quality applicants to fill roles. And we distilled that down to the single biggest issue, which is slightly different than for Scotland, but we think they're quite closely connected, and that's staffing issues and volunteer shortages. And 16% of social enterprises are facing that issue currently. So we have a top 10 areas for action. This will change, it will evolve during the cost of living crisis. But initially, we're calling for VIOs, so volunteer involving organisations volunteering to be supported financially. We need to look at innovative ways to respond to increased demand for services. We need to increase recruitment and improve the retention of volunteers. We need to invest in volunteer management, probably now more than ever. We need to protect the health and well-being of volunteers. The pressures on volunteers towards the end of COVID in terms of fatigue and burnout were so worrying, and we're now seeing this crisis, which is putting even more pressure on volunteers. We need to focus volunteer support where it is most needed. We must ensure that volunteer roles do not replace paid roles. We need to facilitate the engagement of informal volunteers. The cost of living crisis is very different to COVID-19. I think during COVID-19, informal volunteers could see more easily how they could help those in their community, whether it was picking up prescriptions or dropping off some groceries, taking their elderly neighbours who were forced to shield maybe some soup, and just having a socially distanced chat. So we need to look at how we can get across to informal volunteers that the needs of this crisis are different. People need money and advice, but there's also a massive role they can play, particularly over winter, and making sure that those that live on their own aren't socially isolated and lonely, and know that there's people around them that they can call on if they just need to have a chat and a wee blether, a cup of tea. We need to influence government policy, which we're working on hard at the moment, and we know that there's evidence gaps that still need to be filled. We will be releasing quarterly bulletins starting in January with updated evidence to update. So it'll be updated evidence from our initial report. And these are just the relevant links. So these are the sources we've used. We've got the link to the third sector tracker. So if anybody is interested, there's really useful data in it. So you might want to look at it from that point of view. But if anybody wants to participate, if you follow that link, then it will take you to how you sign up. If anybody's got any questions that they don't feel comfortable asking today, they want any extra information, if you've got any case studies of what's working really well, anything at all, I'm always open to emails. My email address is deborah.maltman, not Debbie, but please don't call me Deborah. So that's all from me.
Thanks very much, Debbie. So is Deborah the name that your mum calls you when she's telling you off? Yeah, no, honestly, I find these sorts of things really interesting. I mean, I know it's part of our role to kind of look at the evidence behind the anecdotal stories that we get told. So having resources like the Third Sector Tracker is immensely important. So I would encourage everyone, if you're not already part of that, to kind of sign up. I mean, 1 in 6 organisations having their key issue being shortage of volunteers. Yeah, 16%, 1 in 6. That's going to have a pretty heavy impact on our sector. You know, so I guess it's really important that we look at, from Social Enterprise Scotland's point of view, what can we do? You know, what can we do to help? What can we do to support? So, you know, part of our role as that membership organisation is to not only highlight the challenges that the sector faces, but also maybe some of the potential solutions that are out there. So I think some of our speakers will cover that to follow, but I know there are a few questions in the chat for you, Debbie, and you probably haven't picked them up because you've been focusing on your presentation. But I think Alistair had the first one, which was around rurality. I find that word really difficult. So Alistair, do you want to jump on and just ask the question, or do you want me to just read it out?
Yeah, okay, thanks. No, I was just wondering, in terms of all these surveys and the work being done, whether that was taking into account rurality factors, and that is prices, costs in the islands, from fuel to everything else, is substantially higher. The cost to volunteers to go to things is therefore also higher. And in terms of the economic situation, fuel poverty in the islands is now running at over 80% is the estimate, with severe fuel poverty is actually affecting about 50% of the population and increasing. So all these things, of course, come together and have a psychological as well as an actual effect on people, on volunteers, and in the general public. So I think it's important, particularly if things are being put to government ministers and policymakers, that that the information is fully taking into account the extra and additional costs that islands and remote areas are facing.
Yeah, it's absolutely something that we've been looking at. We do have a new evidence source from YouGov, which does include urban and rural measures. The Third Sector Tracker looks at health boards. So we are looking at breaking down that data at the moment. One thing that we are part of a coalition. We recognise, the importance of volunteer drivers and the impact of cost of volunteer drivers in rural locations is going to be much higher. And we have written to, I want to say the Chancellor, but I think we had to write to 3 to have that mileage rate increased for volunteers, because it hasn't been increased in 10 years. And there's so many organisations that just want to increase it, but they can't because it's got tax implications. So that we are looking to the UK government to change that. We are highlighting the areas where we're seeing the most difficulties. We will be highlighting urban and rural, if not in the next wave, the wave after, of what we're producing, but we're very aware that different geographies, and it's not just looking at deprivation. There was a new piece of research, which I haven't fully read yet, but it highlights that rural communities are going to have some of the biggest impacts. It puts it into groups. So we will absolutely be considering geography and what we're looking at. We know, as with COVID-19, the impacts aren't felt equally across Scotland, and it's not just about deprivation. There are a lot of other factors that play into that. So absolutely, completely agree with all your points, and thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Debbie. Thanks, Alistair. Hannah, there was a question from you in the chat around this. Are the surveys taken by the volunteers or the staff of third sector organisations?
So at the moment, the third sector tracker is staff of organisations, not volunteers. We haven't, during COVID, we went out directly to volunteers with a survey, which may be something we look to do, but as with all organisations, we're facing cost challenges at the moment, and it can be quite cost prohibitive to do something around that. So it's all staff of third sector organisations at the moment, but I think there will be more of a need to do some type of survey around volunteers in the future.
Okay, thanks for that. Hannah, did you want to follow up on that? Is there anything else you want to know there? I'm going to say that. Oh, on you go.
So I just find it, because obviously, a certain amount being the staff of a third sector organization, but when you're talking about the reasons for volunteering or the reasons for stopping volunteering, how can you be definite on those things when it's you answering the questions, not the volunteers?
Good question.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. So what we're doing at the moment is almost triangulating evidence. So we're looking at the impacts on individuals, so like you or I, what impacts are the cost of living having on kind of everything in our daily lives. And one thing that we're really seeing is the impacts of like people using their car less, because as Alistair mentioned, the fuel prices are massive. People aren't going to sports or exercise or other activities they used to do. They're unable to take their children to those activities, even where those activities are free. So we're kind of able to triangulate that evidence a little bit to say, well, people are struggling with transport costs. They're struggling. We're seeing people having to take on additional hours at work. They don't have time for any types of activities that they would do outside of work. We did I'm going to say this wrong and say the name of a Mentimeter during our last AGM last week, and there was a mix of organisations, but we did ask people a specific question on whether if they were volunteering, why weren't they? But I think there is more work to be done just to make sure that we're getting it absolutely right. We're quite concerned at the moment about volunteer apathy. So Colin's word of the dictionary, which I hate, is perma-crisis, but it feels like that for us all. We went from COVID-19 to there being a war in Ukraine to now we're in the cost of living crisis, and people almost feel they can't help themselves at the moment, so they start to withdraw from society. If you can't take your children to activities, the impact on your mental health is just unbelievable, and then you're starting to withdraw into yourself and perhaps not get involved in activities as much. So that's one area that we're doing quite a lot. We're looking at just now, because we're really, really concerned about that as a reason for people not volunteering, alongside people that informally volunteered during COVID-19, perhaps not realising that there is still so much they can do to help those around them. And it can be just making sure that your neighbour's not socially isolated and lonely over winter. That is so vitally important. So we need to look at kind of that as well.
I guess also, Hannah, people that are filling in these trackers as members of staff will potentially be volunteering themselves also, so we'll have direct experience of why, they're either not volunteering as much or not able to volunteer as much. So thanks very much for that. I think probably what I will do just now, and no, you're right, David, the volunteer apathy is it's one of those phrases that fits the circumstance, but it's not one that any of us probably like to hear or use. Okay, so I guess what we'll do now, I think, is move on to the next set of speakers who are, as I say, going to kind of look at, you know, some of the support that's out. They're going to tell you about some of the support that's out there, some of the resources that they have, some of the programs that they run, that type of thing. So first up is Mila Evanics from Pilotlight. So I'm going to read this bit because I need to get it right. So I think there was you recently published a report called Give Your Culture a Workout, which sounds interesting, but it's all about employers encouraging their staff to use their time and skills to support good causes. And I think the report kind of estimated that there was a whopping £17 billion potentially of skills support out there, which is immense. So Mila, I don't know whether you're going to touch on that, but I will hand over to you.
Thank you. I suppose less directly I'll be touching on that in terms of how we facilitate skills-based volunteering, but very happy to add the link at the end to that report for those interested. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and do let me know how that works out for us, just in case. Are people able to see my screen? Great. Okay. This now means that I can't quite see you guys. So apologies for that. If there are any questions, do let me know. Yeah, if you kind of aren't able to see things as well. So introduction to me, I'm Mila Evanics, and I'm the head of charities and impact at Pilotlight. As of the last 8 weeks, though, so I should give that as a caveat before I start. And another caveat to say before we jump into things is you'll see in this presentation the terminology of charities, but by that we don't mean kind of the formal designation of charities. We work with social enterprises, kids, etc. It's just sort of the catch-all term that's used, for better or worse. So why does Pilotlight exist? Sorry, I don't know if you can also see the little, are you able to see the full screen, or do you have anything in front of it? Because for me, it's not quite empty, the screen, so I just want to check.
It just looks like a, full screen to me.
Right, okay, excellent. Sorry, I've got some writing from Zoom on the front of it, so I couldn't tell if you're also seeing that. So we exist to amplify the impact that charities, there's that word already, businesses and individuals can bring to the world. Now, we do this by effectively facilitating skills-based volunteering from the business experts sector, who can help to tackle some pressing strategic challenges that organizations face. All of our programs are free for charities, and they're not typically divided by topic, which is something that makes us quite unique in this space, I think. So, for example, you can bring a funding challenge or a governance challenge on any of the programs. It's more so divided by the amount of capacity that charity leaders have, and also the type of output that you're looking for effectively. In terms of the structure, all of the programs focus on creating an emphasis on kind of enabling strategic thinking space for the charity leaders. Basically, business experts share their skills with the organizations and kind of bring new perspectives, diverse skills, and their experience through pro bono work. And all of that is facilitated by Pilotlight expert staff who sort of have a background in facilitation and coaching. You'll also see another term throughout this presentation, which is Pilotlighter. I'm just giving an early heads up about that. Those we refer to the kind of business sector participants who offer the pro bono support as kind of a catch-all term. So you know what I mean by that. Who we work with, as I mentioned, just because we say charities doesn't mean it's just legally charities. We also work with social enterprises and other organizations, effectively anybody who tackles social change in the UK. It says here that it's organizations of an income of less than 5 million. That's typically the case most of the time, but there are a few opportunities for organizations with larger incomes as well. Thematically, we're open to working with all charities except those with an express mandate to proselytize. So that doesn't exclude kind of charities with religious affiliations altogether. It is just that one specification. We are also starting to try to work more with, for example, charities with an environmental mandate. So the idea of tackling social disadvantage is a very broad catch-all definition. The core of the work is done with kind of organizational leaders. And so one thing that is required is kind of an openness to change. And that's why kind of strategic key points and questions are great to bring into the programs. I won't dwell on this slide for too long. You can have a look at our impact report online if you like. But the kinds of questions that charities bring to us tend to be largely focused around strategy, funding, governance, and leadership, that sort of thing. And I should mention here that when I say funding and finance, we mean more so how to diversify funding streams or build resilience, not so much a sort of we need an extra pair of hands to support in completing funding applications, which is obviously a very valid pro bono ask in and of itself. It's just not the area that we specialize in. So it's more so the big, what are the next steps for the organization? How do we create a new project types of questions? And in fact, there are some questions here that we have dealt with in the past. So some great examples to show you the scope of it. I won't go into these in detail. You'll have the slides after, and you can think about how it might be relevant for you. And also there's one case study here, but there are obviously more case studies on the website as well. So how do we do this? I thought I would give a bit of a blurb of each of our core programs. There are also some bespoke programs, but I thought it would be helpful to give a little bit of an outline of some of the core programs, particularly from the perspective of what it involves from your side of it, basically to make sure that we're trying to make sure that organizations have an understanding of what to expect on each of our programs, given it's not sort of traditional, I need HR support, so I'm going on an HR training. I need evaluation, so I'm getting some evaluation consultancy and type of work. As I said, it's more kind of coaching focused. So Pilotlight 360 is probably the program that the organization is most known for. It's a 10-month-long piece of work. It's a day a month of dedicated intensive work, frequently requires kind of work outside of that as well. It's an in-depth exploration of a strategic challenge and very much a coaching and mentoring type of relationship. So there are 4 senior experienced Pilotlighters, sort of MD level type of people who work with a charity's leader as well as a designated board member. And there's a dedicated Pilotlight project manager who facilitates the relationship and the work. So it's one which is, as I said, our kind of most in-depth program and is great for those very, very meaty next steps questions. We also have Pilotlight Direction, which is 8 weeks long and comes with 6 Pilotlighters who tend to be kind of senior managing director level. They provide a it's kind of around a strategic overview, excuse me. It is not a consultancy, but more so guidance. So at the end of Pilotlight Direction, charities are provided with effectively a roadmap of what next with regards to a specific question or a specific piece of work. It's a great follow-on from some of our other programs because it gives a bit more of a specific we've explored in one project what direction we need to head in. Now we're doing another project to figure out how we can head in that direction and what the roadmap there is. So a lot of our programs are quite complementary and can be sort of put together in a quite modular way. There's also Pilotlight Insight, which is 10 weeks long and comes with 6 dedicated Pilotlighters who are more focused around the analysis and research behind strategic questions. So it supports to make the decision. It's probably the closest that we have to something that feels like consultancy, but isn't actually. You're sort of, it's the people who do that background work and then provide you with analysis and research capacity to think through one of these big strategic questions. We also have Pilotlight Impact Day, which, as the name suggests, is a one-day event. So that obviously makes it quite different to some of these other longer engagements. We've been running it for about 5 years now. It's designed to help explore innovative and practical solutions to a specific, more likely to be operational challenge or opportunity. So Pilotlighters are sort of a mix of analysts to medium mixed level seniority, and they apply their knowledge to come up to idea generate for the charity. So effectively, the charity comes in and there are 3 dedicated groups of Pilotlighters who then spend the day doing desk-based research and kind of throwing around ideas to help solve the challenge, the question the organization comes in with. And as I said, this is probably more focused around operational type challenges. And at the end of the day, you walk away with a summary of the ideas and the and kind of the fresh perspectives. I should note that the Pilotlighters are given sort of the mandate to think outside the box, and obviously have background information on the organization and the challenge before the day starts. But obviously some of the ideas will be more relevant than others. Effectively, it's really helpful for, we think for validating a direction that you might want to go in, but don't quite feel confident in making that decision yet. And also is really helpful in cases where it feels like we've always done this way. We want to figure out how else we can do it. We also have a program called Brain Trust, which is a 90-minute meeting. It's quite a new initiative. Been around, I think, for about a year or 2 now, but with a long-standing partner, which is Barclays. So Barclays, these Pilotlighters all work within Barclays. They're senior business leaders in this particular session, and it's just a 90-minute meeting with these leaders. It's basically a confidential, supportive, and supported by the Pilotlight facilitator session to think through a question. And again, we encourage the Pilotlighters to not limit themselves, so to speak. So they ask tough questions and explore new ways of thinking about a topic. This piece is great for when you're feeling too close to the question to kind of see the range of potential options. It's a bit of that seeing the woods from the tree feeling and wanting to zoom out. It also works really well prior to higher capacity programs, so the ones that require more long-term engagement, because it gives an opportunity to refine and perhaps focus the challenge that you want to explore on a project like Insight or Direction, for example. So next steps. As I mentioned, all of our programs are free to the organizations that we work with. If you see one that you feel you are a great fit for, or that you have a meaty question to explore with, we have an application process which has just been revamped on our website. So I've linked it here, and you can submit an online application. If you're not sure which project would be suitable, there's also the option of choosing I don't know which project I'm applying for, and we'll be in touch with you. If you have any questions as you're filling it out, you can contact my colleague, Kate Stedman. Her email is here. And either way, after you submit an application, somebody in my team will be in touch with you to set up an assessment. So this is kind of almost in some ways it reminds me of like a therapeutic inquiry. It's kind of an inquiry into what the challenge that you're facing is, to kind of learn more about what it is that you need support with, or that we can be helpful with. And then we sort of discuss what the most suitable program is. And often people know which one that is for them. But it's good to kind of have those conversations. And usually these involve a conversation with the CEO and the chair of the trustees. And then there's obviously the admin stuff and setting things up to actually get started. I should also note that with the new application system, you can come back to it. So you can save your application partway through and return to it in case there are any questions that you get stuck on as you go along. It's not a particularly onerous one, but it does ask for some sort of thinking type questions that might take a little bit of mulling over as you're filling it out. In terms of current opportunities, all of our programs are on a rolling application system at the moment. We have done it before in the past where there were sort of strict deadlines, but those are not in place at the moment. As I said, available to anybody who meets our criteria effectively. And we do have on the application page some of the upcoming deadlines, but that's not to say that those are the all-encompassing sort of list of opportunities that we have. Frequently it's about figuring out what program is right, and then we can have a look at what works best for your timing as well. And we sort of have those opportunities on a rolling basis. There was one that I wanted to highlight though, which is on the website as being open to organizations in Aberdeen, Edinburgh, Glasgow, Leeds, or Newcastle. Quite frankly, from anywhere in Scotland, you are very welcome to apply for this in case an impact day appeals to you. I think there are still 1 or 2 spots left on that. It will take place in person, however, in Leeds on the 22nd of February. So I should note that. And unfortunately, at this point in time, we don't cover the travel costs for the charities. We do offer the program for free. We do have some other opportunities that we do run online more and more now, or at least in a mixed format. So obviously, as we've kind of had to get used to that across the last few years, that's given us the opportunity to work with charities who that might have been more of a challenge for previously than now. So either way, please do get in touch if you are interested. If you're interested specifically in this February 22nd Impact Day, do shoot me an email as well. Very happy to kind of make a note of that separately. Other ways to stay in touch with us are to stay up to date with our events and kind of programs. You can sign up to our newsletter. You can check out our website. We also have a charity brochure on that. And also you can follow us on social media. I think probably our LinkedIn is the one that is the most actively used at the moment, and probably Facebook. Or you can contact me directly. I've got my email address here as well as my LinkedIn. I am actually getting better at using LinkedIn for the first time in my life. My head of comms is very happy about that. So I will see it and get back to you quickly either way. And yeah, we'll send around these slides afterwards, so you'll have my contact details and everything. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thanks very much, Mila. I must admit, I didn't realize the range of programs you guys ran. So yeah, good to know that now. And I suppose it depends where organizations are and kind of what support they need or what their current issue is. So yeah, thanks for sharing that with us. I think we're still sharing the screen.
I'm trying to find a way to turn it off. Oh, stop share. There we go. Sorry, the big red button.
Right, I'm gonna move on to our next speaker. So next up is Kirsty from Scottish Tech Army, and I think I'm right in saying that Scottish Tech Army came out of the COVID pandemic. But I'll hand over to Kirsty just now to tell you more.
Thanks very much, Jane, and hello everybody. It's very nice to see you. I got told I had 5 minutes, so I haven't done a presentation. I thought I would just talk at you all just for 5 minutes to tell you briefly. Yes, the Scottish Tech Army was a pandemic response initiative that started during the first lockdown, really just to bring tech professionals who were furloughed or out of contract or redundant and bring them to bear on some of the digital challenges that charities and social enterprises were facing at the time. You know, just not being able to deliver their services the way that they had up until that point. You know, their doors were shut. And a lot of the support that we gave was to enable home working. It was, you know, do we use Zoom or Teams? You know, there were a huge range of questions that were being asked. I think interestingly, from a volunteering perspective, the response to the launch of the Scottish Tech Army was very unexpected and very fast. So we had 125 volunteers signed up on the first day. We had 700 within 5 weeks. You know, we had more volunteers than we had problems that we were trying to solve. And one of the challenges with tech solutions is, and forgive me if this is a broad brush kind of assessment, is many of the asks that we get are from organizations who have decided for themselves what they think the solution should be. And actually they haven't quite understood the problem that they've got. You know, it's that the techies are the ones that are maybe there that can potentially give you what they think is actually the best solution to the problem that you've got. So when we ask organizations to come forward with requests for help, we don't want you to tell us what you need. We want you to tell us what you can't do. Tell us the problem that you've got and what you can't do, and we can work through with you what we think the best tech solution to that might be, because sometimes it might not be tech at all. So that's basically how the Tech Army started, was that pandemic response initiative. But we realised after about 6 months that many of the challenges that you were stepping forward with were only really being spotlighted by the pandemic. They were there already, and it's because you don't have the resources at hand to sort of go sort of full on tech. That's not what that's not what your organisations are there for. But technology can actually really help you as an organisation to do what you do. It frees people up to do what they want to do in terms of that front end delivery, and it allows you to potentially expand your reach if you're doing things online in the way that you were only ever able to do it in person before. We're now up to, we have over 2,200 registered volunteers in the Tech Army, but they're not all active, and many of them are, you know, signed up and didn't really become active in the first place, but they're a fantastic resource for us to tap into. And it's wonderful to see people stepping forward, getting something from it, you know, where they're able to give the skills and the expertise they have for the greater good. They don't just do it for a living, they actually also now give their time and their expertise and their skills, you know, to help organisations as well. And I think also it's that transfer of knowledge, and the transfer of knowledge goes two ways. So the techies get to, to pass on, how to think about using technology as a solution. They get to dispel some of the myths and the fears around it, but also they learn that not everybody's a techie, not everybody thinks that way, and there are many people out there who need support and who need help, and many people in tech industry just have never come across that before, and it's great for them to know that. It's a civil society kind of thing that goes on there as well, I think is extremely important. We're now, I suppose I would say, we have a broader Tech for Good initiative. There's a lot of fantastic Tech for Good that goes on, but a lot of it's very siloed. You might get one organisation helping one charity with a solution, and then that's the end of it, and nobody ever else finds out about it, and that solution isn't shared because that's not what you're there to do. So what we're trying to do is to surface a lot of that Tech for Good, because we want to prevent a lot of the potential duplication in that. There's no point building the same solution 10 times. If the solution exists, we should be able to share it across multiple organisations. And that's led us to launch this year something called the Tech for Good Alliance, which is an initiative by the Scottish Tech Army that is in fact UK-wide, and that's tapping into skilled volunteering time that's offered through CSR programs and companies. So actually going into the company, going to the companies and tapping into their skilled tech talent and bringing it to bear on challenges that we've got. We spend a lot of time in the Scottish Tech Army working out just what the solution should be, and that is in terms of actually what's the problem that you've got, what's the tech solution that might work for you, and do you have the capacity to actually manage that solution? I think one of the big challenges the sector faces sometimes is they get a really complicated techie solution that only 2 people in your organization know how to use, and one of you leaves, and then all of a sudden it becomes a burden and not a solution at all. So a lot of the conversation is around what capacity do you have within your organization to manage a particular type of solution, and based on that, making sure that you get the one that you need, but also in recognition of the fact that it's volunteers that are giving their time and their expertise here. We break these projects down into chunks of time and effort so that the volunteers don't get fatigued, shall we say, that, you know, many of them are stepping forward, giving their time, like many volunteers, of an evening outside of their working hours, and asking them to do that 5 days a week for 6 weeks to build a solution is just completely unrealistic. So we don't do that. And what we try to do is to break down the projects in such a way that people are working together and potentially can hand over to somebody else to help build a solution. We get a lot of volunteers who have come through things like Code Clan and the Open University, so they're reskilling or upskilling or whatever the word is that you want to use, but they're basically come into the tech army with kind of raw skills that they're all terrified of using. And I think one of the hilarious things, one of the joys that we have an orientation session in the tech army where, you know, people come on a call like this and they're asked to introduce themselves and, you know, what do they want, you know, what is it they want to get involved with, and, you know, some of them will be user experience specialists, some of them will be software developers, some of them will be data analysts and all this kind of stuff. And to a man and woman, the ones that have come out of the colleges or the academies and things like that, disqualify themselves from volunteering on the basis that they've got no experience. And you're kind of going, yeah, if that's why you've come here, was to get the experience, you know. So in order to do that, you actually have to step up and put yourself forward, you know, for something. And we always marry them up alongside more skilled professionals, so they get the experience, they get to build their networks within the tech sector, if you like, and they get to practice those skills in a sort of a safe environment. Bye, Hannah. Sorry, we're boring you. So the volunteers kind of get a kind of a warm experience from it, if you like. They get something from it as well. I have to say, I think we're slightly bucking the trend. I said this to Jayne on email as well, that our volunteers, the number of volunteers that we're getting hasn't really dried up as a result of the cost of living crisis. We're still getting volunteers that are stepping forward. It does tend to kind of go through sort of peaks and troughs, but we're not seeing the cost of living having a particular impact on them. I think what we'll start to see is that having an impact on the organisations coming to us for help, because right now they just don't have the capacity to even think about it. And I would kind of encourage people to try to think differently about that. Technology really can take away some of the drudge of running an organisation. The Scottish Tech Army has 2,200 registered volunteers. It has more than 40 projects running at any given time, and it's run by 3.5 people. And it's because we leverage the technology we have at our fingertips absolutely to its maximum. And I know that we can do that because we're a techie organisation, but I would love to be able to send that message out to social enterprises to say, actually, if you use the technology well, it really can support you and free up your people to do what they came into the organisation to do in the first place, which is to help others. I shall stop talking now and happy to take any questions if you have them. I should say, I'll put the website in the chat. If you want to step forward with a project, please go there, and as I say, a couple of paragraphs telling us what your problem is, what you can't do, and how you think, and if you think that technology might be able to solve it for you, then somebody will get back in touch. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I was having trouble unmuting myself there. Thanks ever so much, Kirsty. The expanding reach through technology is one thing, but I think adding expertise and freeing time up within organisations, could be a complete game changer for some organisations. And speaking from my own experience as I volunteer on the board of a charity who use Scottish Tech Army, they had a fantastic experience, and it's made a huge difference to their kind of membership management type software and how they use it and the benefit they get from it. So yeah, I'd absolutely encourage people to kind of take a look at that if it fits with where they're at currently. Okay, Sue, Right, I am now handing over to Elaine from Inspiring Scotland. So Elaine is totally living up to her organisation's name, and I hope she doesn't mind me sharing this with you because she's joining us from her holiday. So I'm incredibly grateful to her for giving up her time to be with us today. I'll let her take over from here.
Okay, thanks, Jane. I'm assuming that the technology works from holiday, so that's good. And I didn't want to show you the lovely sunshine, so I put my corporate banner behind me. So apologies for that. I would just say to everyone, I would really encourage you to get in touch with Scottish Tech Army. We have signposted a lot of our funded organisations their way since the very beginning. When Scottish Tech Army was born at the beginning of COVID, and we have, in fact, all the volunteers at Scottish Tech Army have delivered more than they initially set out to do. I just wish we could lever the technology that we have at Inspiring Scotland a little bit better, but anyway, it's a conversation for another day. Because there's, I know, I'll give you a call, because I've got 500 volunteers. I have 20 or 30 projects running every month, and there's one person, there's half of me and half of my colleagues. So I'm sure there's more we could be doing. Anyway, without any more ado, I will start sharing my screen. Just need to always annoy. Sorry. Slideshow. Okay, I'm sorry, getting the technology started. Sorry. So, Inspiring Scotland, if you haven't heard about us, we are quite a large charity that operates from an Edinburgh base throughout Scotland. We have 17, soon to be 18 different funded areas, all focusing on delivering a Scotland that's free from poverty and disadvantage. So that is a very broad meaning within Inspiring Scotland, I'm happy to say. Have I got time to run this video? If it works, it might not. Try one more time. My name is Elaine Crichton, and I work for an organisation called Inspiring Scotland. Inspiring Scotland works with a huge number of charities throughout Scotland. We have 17 different funded areas. My job within Inspiring Scotland is to work with all of those charities and all of those funding areas, heading up a unit that's called the Specialist Volunteer Network. And what that network does is it provides professional advice given by individuals to charities for nothing, or usually for nothing. So charities get access to senior lawyers, senior accountants, social media people, all sorts of resources that we find too difficult to source and definitely quite expensive. It's really important in today's world because money in every sector, but specifically in the charity sector, is really tight, especially after COVID, when a lot of resources were used up, if you like. There's also over 25,000 charities in Scotland, all competing for the same funding pots. So if the charities can actually get some advice or some resources from a professional without having to pay the professional fees, that means that they've got more money to deliver the services that are much needed across the country in different areas. Why people get involved is two reasons. The first reason is the professionals want to give something back. So they're at a stage in their career where they've got all of the expertise and they want to do a little bit of work pro bono and actually give back. Also find that a lot of people are wanting to be involved more in making social change happen, and so helping out a charity is a really good way of doing that and getting involved at the grassroots level in making social change. We work with over 700 charities, and I would really like more of the charities to use our service, and I can promise that the professional volunteers are not scary suits and that they really understand what charities are trying to do. And I would encourage all charities who are listening to this video to get in touch with me. It's really easy, no form filling. If you simply Google Specialist Volunteering at Inspiring Scotland, that'll take you straight to the webpage, or you can email me. I've got a great email address. It's Elaine, ELAINE @inspiringscotland.org.uk, or you can find me on LinkedIn, Elaine Crichton.
So, oh, stop.
Okay.
Just go on to the next slide now. I should say, as I'm fiddling about with my technology here, it's not doing a great job, that when I say charities, just ignore charities. It could be KICs, it could be social enterprises of any shape, description. We support anyone in Scotland that you know, comes to us and is looking for a little bit of professional support for free. So don't be put off when I was just using charities. It's mostly charities that we fund in Inspiring Scotland, although increasingly more and more social enterprises. So yeah, as it says on the slide there, it's managed and funded by Inspiring Scotland. So I'm a core cost to the organisation, as my FD keeps reminding me of. But the service that we provide is open to all organisations across Scotland. We try to be reactive to ever-changing demands. Obviously, we've got all of these organisations that we're working with who are coming and telling us about the problems and that they're experiencing, and we pick up themes. So we put on a lot of workshops, etc., to address those themes if there's enough people interested. It's a great way of us collaborating with the private sector and the third sector, because there's a lot of myths around, you know, what the private sector does and what the third sector does, and the two don't understand one another. But when you can actually get them together working on a project, it leads to great things, actually. Clearly, getting access to free expert advice saves organisations a huge amount of money. Quite often, the organisations don't know how much money they have saved, because typically they won't have gone out and costed how much, you know, it costs a lawyer to do a high level review of their lease that they're just about to sign, or they won't have, and going back into Kirsty's case as well, they won't have costed out how much a new website is going to cost them, or a refresh of a website. So they don't often know how much money that it's saved coming and getting free expert advice, but it definitely saves them a lot of money, which can be used for other purposes within the organisations. We've been doing this for a little while. I've been with Inspiring Scotland for the last 7.5 years. The project was up and running in a smaller sort of like form 2 years before that. So it's a long-standing commitment that we have to this, providing this service and to the sector. And also we're tapped into, as Kirsty is as well, at Scottish Tech Army, to the UK pro bono organisation. So we're talking amongst ourselves and learning from each other. And then we're also connected with our global pro bono organisations as well. So there's a lot going on. If I could work with my slide, that would be good. Yeah. So we're often quite asked, so what kind of support can you give? And it's really difficult for me to say, well, I can do this and I can do that, and I could do the next thing, because it's like listing all the sweets in a sweetie shop. It's really, really difficult. So what we try and do is we just put it into broad categories. Some of them you'll see here. These are my pinball wizard little men, and these are the broad categories. But within these broad categories, there's a lot of diversification, and it's basically come along and ask. Contact myself or my colleague Tommy Seymour, and we will let you know very, very quickly if we have the resource within the specialist volunteer network to help you out. Some scores on the doors: 3,000 hours of volunteering last year, over £650,000 worth of support was delivered pro bono to just over 200 organisations. That's a stat I love giving my FD, because that means that they can still afford me, keep me in a job, because that's a great ROI for me. We have roughly about 29 to 30 requests on a monthly basis, and we do a growing, used to be a little sideline, but a lot of activity and recruiting trustees from our specialist volunteer network. Quite often the volunteer gets involved with the charity and wants to get more involved, and sometimes it can actually even end up on the board or on some subcommittee, which is absolutely fantastic. This is just a little bit of a plug for our trustee and governance service. So we advertise trustee vacancies for free on our webpage. We actively push those opportunities out to our specialist volunteers. And then if you ever wanted a board training session, that's something that I provide to the Specialist Volunteer Network myself for free. So year to date, I've trained 63 boards, I think it is, and no complaints so far, but maybe they're too scared to complain. So anyway, that's just a whistle-stop tour of what we provide at Inspiring Scotland within the Specialist Volunteer Network. I'm going to stop sharing. So it really is, we have got all of these people who are teed up to support you and your organisation with whatever it is that's giving you sleepless nights or making you reach for Google and find out how you solve it. And they come in and they hopefully solve your problem and leave again, and that's it. So there isn't a lot of time involved from your organisational point of view, unless it is a more involved request. For instance, it could be a refresh of a business plan, in which case we need capacity from a person or a group of people at the organisation. If it was mentoring and coaching, perhaps, of yourself as the senior leader, someone in your leadership team, again, that's not an in and out, that's something that's probably going to last over 6 months or whatever is tailored exactly to your organisation. So lots of different requests. So I think the rule is it's free, it's really good, high quality, and we're also really, really approachable. Both Tommy, Seymour and myself, very approachable. Just reach out to us, ask. I get quite a lot of emails starting, I don't suppose. And usually the answer is yes. I even had one a couple of weeks ago about, I don't suppose you have any contacts that could lend us a red carpet for an event that we're doing. Now, I have to say that's a wee bit outside of professional volunteering, but it just so happens I do have a couple of contacts with theatres in Edinburgh, so we were able to find a red carpet for them. So, but please expunge that from your memories. I'm really wanting requests that involve lawyers or accountants or social media people, or, you know, with professional professional skills that they want to give back for free rather than pieces of carpet. Anyway, I'll stop there. I'm happy to take any questions, and thank you, Jane, for allowing me to be part of this today.
No, thanks, Elaine. If you'd have asked me topics that might have come up on the session today, I'm not sure sourcing red carpets would have been top of my list. So thank you for that. I think what we're hearing constantly is this whole sort of mutually beneficial aspect of volunteering, regardless of who the organisation is, regardless of who the people are, and I think that's fantastic. And the fact that relationships extend often past that time limited piece of work, it's heartwarming as well. And yeah, I think we all know how difficult it can be to recruit trustees to boards. So anything that kind of helps that, and anything that, maybe helps with that step in the door for individuals to, kind of feel the passion within the social enterprise sector, I think is a good thing. So thank you, Elaine. Just before, because I'd quite like to let Elaine head back off to her holiday in the sun, does anyone have any specific questions for Elaine just now? If not, we'll be sharing the presentations and Elaine's contact details after the event, so you can pick up with her afterwards. I'm not seeing anyone. I'm not seeing any virtual or wavy hands. So yeah, thanks again, Elaine. And okay. I hope you enjoy the rest of your holiday and don't do too much work.
Okay. Thanks so much, everyone.
See you later.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Okay, so last, and I hope she knows by no means least, we have Maggie here from PwC. You may or you may not be aware, but PwC have quite a strong volunteer offer. So I think Maggie's going to kind of share with you what that is, and the type of volunteer initiatives that they have and how their support for social enterprise can work. Maggie, over to you.
Thanks very much, Jane, and hi everyone. It's lovely to be part of today's session. So yeah, as Jane said, my name is Maggie Robb. I work in the community engagement team here at PwC. The role I have within that team is everything really connected to social enterprises, and in particular managing and leading our Social Entrepreneurs Club, which is a network across the UK of around 300 social entrepreneurs that we support through sharing the skills of our people. All of that skills sharing is done in work time through our volunteering support programs, and we give our staff up to 6 days a year, which works out around sort of 45 hours of time during the working week to give to community organisations. So really my role is kind of coordinating all of those people and putting them into kind of really impactful and purposeful roles. In our last financial year, so the year to June this year, our overall community contribution in the UK was 8.5 million, but only a small amount of that is actually in cash donations. And that's because we believe as a business, the biggest and the most sustainable impact that we can have is in sharing those skills. Our start is also actually a massive learning opportunity for our people as well. They're often, as you can imagine, in a big organisation working with big clients, getting to see a very small piece of the business that they might be working on at any time. Whereas working with an ambitious sort of social entrepreneur, they get to see every single, different challenge, different opportunity, and sort of really develop and hone their own skills as well. So across the UK, we've got around 23,000 staff, and around 1 in 4, so a quarter of them get involved in volunteering in any given year. So it is a big number that we're sort of managing. Looking specifically at the support that we give social enterprises through our club, the club is free to join, and all of the support we give is free as well. We support through one-to-one mentoring. We have group coaching sessions. So every month we have these drop-in sessions where a social entrepreneur might arrive with a particular problem or challenge, or and we'll just help them unpick that, sometimes getting to the root cause that may not be quite what the social entrepreneur thought it was, or finding different ways forward. So really sort of setting them off over a period of 90 minutes, 2 hours with a kind of route map ahead. And we do sort of touch points after that as well to check on progress and see how that's all going. We do a whole range of different workshops and masterclasses on sort of business topics, as well as kind of personal development areas as well. So over the pandemic, we were doing a lot of those, around things like virtual facilitation, virtual pitching, all of the sort of emerging challenges that social entrepreneurs were facing. And with those sessions, we very much listen to our members. So our mentors are key in helping us shape the rest of the programme, really, because we need to listen, find out what emerging topics that we need to be sort of tapping into, and finding experts in the business to support those social entrepreneurs with. We also do networking events. Obviously those have been paused and changed really over the pandemic, but those are coming back again this year, and an awful lot of bespoke support as well. I would say we have bucked the trend as a business over the last couple of years as well, in that our volunteer numbers overall, I'd say, have increased really. Certainly with social enterprises, all of our social mobility work with schools took a real hit. We were still supporting schools, but working virtually. So we were reaching big audiences, but having that sort of more centrally run. And a lot of those volunteers came across over to social enterprise. And whilst the social mobility team has kind of all bounced back with their volunteering, I'm really delighted that everything that we've done with social enterprises, we're retaining those numbers. Looking at some of the more bespoke support that we give now, there's a couple of sort of highlights that we've had that have started over the last couple of years. First one is our Summer Interns Dragons Gen Challenge. And I started this in 2021. It involves all of our summer interns that join us. So in 2021, we had about 200. This year, we had 400. They worked in teams for the whole of their internship in the summer with us. Each team was paired with a social enterprise, and they were given the task of going away and researching, coming up with proposals, ideas, that real sort of vision piece around things like branding, social media, sustainability, growth strategies. There was a whole range of different things that we asked them to look at, and they were working together with as a team, but also with buddies from PwC who were supporting them, challenging them, making sure they were on the right track with things. It was run as a Dragon's Den, as I say. So at the end, we did a kind of showcase afternoon. All the social entrepreneurs that were supported took part in that. We chose winners and runners up, and it was amazing. I mean, one thing that I took away from 2021 was just how high the standard of work that they came up with was. It was just absolutely amazing. And I think the vision that they had as well, they perhaps weren't constrained by a lot of the kind of realities, I guess, that some of our staff might have been in presenting those ideas. but they came up with some fantastic things, and a lot of those were then taken on board and implemented. So it grew this summer, and next summer it's going to be even bigger because we have a cohort of around 500 to 600 summer interns joining us. So that is open for applications to be part of that. We also have an annual day of fundraising and volunteering across the firm called One Firm One Day. It's in May every year, and next year it's going to be on the 19th of May. Doesn't have to be that exact day, it can be a day in May at another time that suits, but basically what we get across the firm is huge numbers of teams that come forward asking me, asking my colleagues, what can I get involved in my communities? How can I use the team of 10, 20 for a full day? To benefit and impact communities. So we open a bit of an application process from February onwards. We invite all of our social entrepreneurs and relationships with charities as well to apply for one of those teams, and then you sort of would scope the day out with them and make sure that you're getting some good impact from the time and the skills that they have. We also have a couple of pro bono opportunities as well. There's one which is part of one of our management leadership programs. It's taking place in March, April next year. So I think the closing date is actually next week for it, but you get 2 days of time for a team of 12 from PwC, and that's of our sort of high performing managers. So those that are looking for that next promotion level up. So you're getting a really good cohort of people who will look at different issues and challenges from a number of different angles. So that's a kind of few highlights of some of the more bespoke ways, but we are really keen to grow our membership, especially in Scotland. As I say, everything really now is run virtually with the club and with the support. So we're matching mentors with social entrepreneurs in completely different locations. It doesn't always work like that, but we are doing that. So we are managing to support many more of our club members in ways that are really impactful for them. But we're keen to grow the club, and certainly in more rural areas as well. Traditionally, the club membership has been sort of clustered around our UK offices. We don't need to do that anymore, so we can be far more sort of far-reaching in the support that we give. Alongside everything that I've said today as well, there's a lot of flexibility within that. So we have worked with Scottish Tech Army as well. So locally and in regions and offices, we do get a lot of passion and interest in working with different organisations locally, and we really support that as well. So nothing, it doesn't sort of close the doors to loads of other different opportunities as well. It's just that the club is a great way of sort of channeling a lot of the skills and expertise that we have in the right direction, and to measure the impact that has. So that's kind of, whistle stop tour through it all from me. So I don't know if anyone has got any questions.
Right, thanks very much, Maggie. Appreciate the whistle stop tour because I'm very conscious of time. So that you did a brilliant job there. Thank you. I love the sound of the Summer Intern Dragon's Den programme, which sounds far less intimidating than the one that we see on the telly. So yeah, great to hear about that. Right, as I say, I know what the time is and I know when the session's due to end. So has anyone got any questions for the speakers that are still here, either or anything that you'd like to share with your own experiences on volunteering, whether it's positive or maybe less so? Has anyone used like Pilotlight or Scottish Tech Army, or have anyone been involved with PwC Inspiring Scotland? Well, maybe you will now after this session, potentially. That is the idea. Anyway, Kirsty, is that a hand?
Yeah, it's just quickly sort of listening to what Maggie had to say, and Elaine, and Mila as well. I think one of the things I would love to encourage organisations to do is just to think really big, and then come and ask a question. If you come and say, it would be great if we could do this, and the assumption probably is that, it can't be done because it's too big or it's going to be too expensive or whatever. But actually just, we have an expression in the Tech Army, which is to think big, start small and move fast. And actually the big vision that where you want to get to is so important, and organisations like PwC and Pilotlight and Tech Army and Inspiring Scotland, we can all help you kind of get there, but you do it in manageable chunks. And so I think that was the message I would say, is that just because it looks like it's a big challenge or a big problem, it doesn't mean that it's insurmountable. It's all about, you know, eating an apple one bite at a time. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Kirsty. I mean, I think there is so much support. There's resources that are out there. There's capacity to add. There's expertise to add. All that's available. I guess it's about, first of all, knowing about it and then knowing how to access it. And to be honest, the way that it's been explained today, it's all sounded incredibly easy to access, or at least to have a discussion. And that's the starting point, isn't it? You know, it's having a conversation, because sometimes what you think you need isn't actually what you need, and you need something different. And it's quite nice to have that time to sort of talk about it and discuss it. I think in our sector, social enterprise, I mean, I speak to so many people who run, have set up, have developed social enterprises. And there is that feeling that they have to be able to do everything and they have to be experts in everything. And actually, you know, that for a start, that's not possible. And also there are experts out there that you can tap into and that can help you and support you on your social enterprise journey. So unless there are any other final points that anyone wants to make or any final questions, Mila.
I just wanted to add on the back of exactly as you guys were saying, that we too are, you know, not each of these organizations has their own area of expertise, but none of us are also experts in everything. But one thing that I think we're really good at is knowing where you can go. And so, you know, if you sort of enter the route of asking for support from one place, and for example, Kirsty might be a better point of support on that front, you know, we pass people back and forth. So you're also not expected to remember and to know where to go for all support at all times. We're here to help with that as well.
Excellent. It's collaboration, isn't it? And it's in its best form. So, and I guess that's part of Social Enterprise Scotland's role as well, to kind of have a broad understanding of all the levels of the different types of support, etc., that's available also. I think we've just had a really positive message coming from Louise. Yeah, which I haven't had a chance to read, I'm afraid, but I think it's saying really good things about Pilotlight and Inspiring Scotland. So yeah, thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah, good to hear that it was a positive experience. So I guess, given the time, I think what I will do just now is just to thank all our fantastic speakers again for taking the time to come along today, for sharing with us what they do and how they can help, and for Debbie for so comprehensively setting the scene and with evidence as well, which is kind of key to all of this, I think. We'll be sharing the presentations after the event, along with speaker email addresses, so you can get in touch, ask questions, that type of thing. And obviously, if you've got any questions for Social Enterprise Scotland, or if there's anything we can help with, then yeah, just drop me a line also. So I will say cheerio to you all, and maybe see you again soon. Thanks again. Bye-bye.